Right, welcome back friends. Today we are looking at the Imperial Eagle, and I thought I would start on the outside of it. Other than to say it's huge, I'm trying to give you some scale. So that set of stairs, which is clearly where you go into the ship itself, is, I would say, like 20 stairs in terms of height, and the nose of the ship would be at the level of a second-story balcony of a house. So that sort of gives you, or first story I should say, so ground level, first story, balcony, that's the level of the nose that I'm looking at the moment. So that gives you an idea of the height. In terms of width, it's probably the width of a 737 to the engines. So not the points of the wings beyond the engines, but the nacelles on the end, or whatever they're called, would be roughly where the props of the 747 would be. And then there's obviously wing that goes on beyond it. So this is about the size of a 747 with the wings chopped off in terms of both probably height and width. And I know that you're listening to me going, yeah, everyone says that. It is just something that you have to experience. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. Right, let's jump in. Now, as always, Old Headless and I are going to give you a walking tour of the cockpit. To begin with, let's orientate ourselves sitting down. So there are some handles up here. This is roughly where that handle is. This is roughly where that handle is. So slightly more forward than in the Sidewinder, but certainly you could hang off these just like you would in the Sidewinder or the old monkey bar thing. So we'll begin with the cockpit tour as always, and we'll just start at the front. We'll say hello to Headless. Hello, Headless. Yes, it's still freaky, you moving around there, buddy. Right, so unlike the other vids, I'm going to actually go backwards from the front and show you how far it is to that back door. Right, so to have any hope of making it all the way back there, I have to start kind of behind the seat already, which gives me a good chance to give you the first look at the back of the Imperial seat, which is all very fancy and kind of H.R. Geiger-esque. I'll give you a proper look at that later on. Now, I realise that my head is still moving around as much as I try and keep it still. Even when I'm talking, I expect that it's bouncing. So I'm going to keep my head movements down to a minimum so you can enjoy a smoother video experience. But I appreciate that it still moves around, but I'll try my best. All right. So if we spin around, we get our first view at the back of the Imperial Eagle and this long hallway. Now, my room is 3.6 meters by 3.6 meters, which is about the maximum that you can use in the VIVE. And hopefully we'll make it to the door, but I'm not certain. Right. So heading down this hallway, we see some handles, fairly basic grab handles, I would suggest. Nothing amazing about those. And a couple of these lockers. Now these are really, really long. I think that you could probably store, not quite, but almost a full surfboard. That's about the size and shape of that locker there, is about a surfboard shape. Underneath that, we have two smaller lockers on smaller hatches. Probably for luggage or something similar, or very fancy in the Imperial colours, and some lovely brushed aluminium there on the floor in combination with what looks like some non-slip plastic maybe, and probably matted metal edges there clipped together to make the actual floor itself. So really nicely finished for what is effectively a fighter ship. This is actually a really nicely put together ship. There's the closer look at this sort of brushed aluminium kind of look. It's very fancy, sort of high-end materials as you would expect from the Empire. Moving back, we have what appears to be a coffee machine or a drink dispenser of some description. With a nozzle there, a little place for your cup to go. No idea what actually would come out of that, and my tracking is glitching out there a little bit. Little panel with arrows. Not sure what that means, probably just open and close, I would guess, given that it says D1 on the actual door itself, and that's reflected on the panel with the buttons. Some handles on either side of the doors. and that the door is unlocked and pressurized to 12 psi. Interesting. And then we have breathable nitrogen and oxygen, and that's it. So, if I go as far towards this end as I can, I am nearly there. I'm touching the door. But yeah, the tracking is absolutely glitching out. So this is where the door is, right behind me, and I'd have to walk all the way down this corridor, and you can see the scale of walking in real life to get anywhere near the front seat, which I am now touching, and I've run into something. Also, I failed to mention that above you, you can see this really awesome skylight kind of configuration, which gives whoever is back here a really lovely view through the top of the ship. And even though there's some paneling up here which look like, which look like they could be cupboards, they're not, they're just panels. And some nice LED lights, and that's about it really. So basic, but very high-end materials and very nicely put together. So now a bit more of a closer look at this H.R. Geiger-esque kind of chair. So really nice materials. Looks like it's made out of shiny sort of plastic maybe. Matte ridging, not sure what that's all about. Bit of a vent down there, looks like a vent for your fart gas. And maybe a hydraulic strut to hold the whole thing up. And it looks like it has a slider. It almost seems like it would slide on that bit of metal there all the way from front to back. And you'll see that as a recurrent theme in the Imperial ships. They usually have a slider for the seat, which will make for a very interesting mechanism when we actually are able to get out of the seat, and whether it moves backwards and swivels around to let us get out, etc. So that will be a fascinating experience. Around the sides of Old Headless here, we have some pretty hardcore looking rails holding the joystick on, but pretty cool looking, and some hoses going from front to back to something, who knows what. Looks like a reasonably comfortable seat, although as you'll see later on in some of the two-pilot configurations, the back of the chair is actually just molded plastic, and I don't think it'd be that comfortable to actually sit on. And this white material all along the sides, I think, is what gives it that Geiger-esque appearance for me, because it looks like some sort of weird, shiny alien skin. Now, in terms of the front of the cockpit, the scale is about the same as the Sidewinder, maybe a bit smaller. So the shield rings are about the size of a small dinner plate, and just comparing it to the Xbox controller, it's about 1.5 times the width of the Xbox controller for the actual model, the virtual model of the Eagle itself. And the dash itself is made of really nice materials as well. It's some sort of a carbon fiber maybe, or fiberglass kind of material, probably carbon fiber, combined with some plastic inlays. It looks like a sports car basically. It's a really nicely put together bit of kit. There's your hologram generator. The projector for this hologram looks again about the size of a Lazy Susan, so maybe 60 centimeters in diameter, quite wide. And then the rest of the dash is fairly boring and generic, just made up of some nice materials, but nothing terribly exciting happening here. And if we look under the dash, it's just plain. There's nothing at all going on under here of any exciting interest, as you might expect. Time to start breaking immersion. So I'm going to pop my head outside of the Imperial Eagle itself and see what we can find. So you can see that most of the exterior is actually modelled. I feel like I'm about to run into something, but there we are. There's the front of it, modelled really nicely, even in first person, which is kind of fairly unnecessary. I'm trying to be cautious to keep my movements slow and steady so that you guys don't have to spew. Looks like there's a ladder that goes up to the cockpit, which is kind of interesting. Very much a fighter plane configuration thing, but surely in an ED you don't get out that way, you get out through the back, so I'm not sure the utility of that. And the nacelles, or whatever they're called, on the edges there, they're about the size of a limousine in terms of length, stretch limo, and in terms of width, about half the size of a stretch limo. So they're actually really, really big. And I know it's obvious to say everything in Elite Dangerous is really, really big, but I'm trying to give you some sense of the actual scale here. So about the length of a stretch limo, about the width, half the width of a stretch limo, and about the height of a van. So that maybe gives you some vague idea of what size those things are. And they're, quite a distance away. Again, that 747 to the engines, I think, is probably an accurate comparison. And here you can see what I've called the thing on the side, even though, again, in low res, and some other greeblings and details which are rendered even from the inside. And this is about as close as I can get to standing on the ground at the rear of the ship. It's still not quite right. I'm floating about 1.5 feet off the ground. That gives you an idea of what it would be like to walk up to the back of the ship in order to actually get into it. Now, the ship is large. Those doors there feel like they're about that wide, but in terms of height, they probably only come up to about here. So if you're 6 foot like me, you'd have to actually duck. The other thing that's interesting is that there are ladders on both sides of that hatch, which you've probably seen before, but it'd be interesting to see where they actually lead to. Those ladders are very far off the ground, so you would need to have some extra steps or something to be able to reach that ladder. It's probably starts at about that height, trying to give you that scale, so probably maybe just under 6 feet, where the bottom rung of those two side ladders start, and then you'd have to climb up from there. Alright, now here's the first spot I'm going to absolutely break your immersion, and that is by sticking my head straight down through the floor to see where that hatch comes in. So you can see where the door is there at the back that you would enter the cockpit through. If I now duck down, stick my head through the floor, you can see where those landing gear actually come up and where they would go. So it goes into a space that looks like it's directly below, maybe, the entry door to the rear of the cockpit. And there, those two things that are glitching out and flashing at the back are the two hard points down the bottom, the two small hard points. And beyond that, that box you can see is the cargo hold. Alright, now here I'm standing right at the very back of that front hallway that we saw, roughly actually on the ground, so it seems to have worked reasonably well. Let's have another quick look at this machine. There is actually a nozzle in there leading to nothing. But that seems to be a drink dispenser of some description. And the hallway is probably 3 meters long, I would say. You could definitely lay down a single bed mattress in here and it wouldn't even touch the sides. You would still have quite a bit of space. Again, trying to relate it to things that are in real life. Right, now we're going to walk through this door. Good luck. Here we go. Alright, so we're immediately faced with the medium size hard point that's coming up through the roof itself. Let's see what else we can see. So we can see the bottom part of those landing gear and a bit of what looks like a walkway. So in theory, if they modeled this, they could have someone walking up into here and then landing on that landing down there and maybe using a small ladder on the side here to get to the rear aspect of that door. So certainly it could work. And if we take a peek past this hard point, you can see down the back there the rear landing gear and the cargo hatch, as well as down there you can also see the two small hard points. There we are. So there you have it. Hopefully that gives you a good interior look at the Imperial Eagle. There's not much point flying this thing in VR because you can't really see anything different other than what I've already shown you. You can't see any hard points. You can't see the scoops. Nothing really happens. So in VR, much of a muchness looks how you see it now. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Coming at you real soon with more of these. Different models. Plan to go through the whole series of ships. So please subscribe and let me know what you think. See you in the next one. Fly safe, Commanders.